and welcome to the A Cherry on Top YouTube channel. I am Jessica, and today's video is part of our Technique Tuesday YouTube series, where each month we focus on a new technique or a topic, and this month's technique is metallics. I'm working in my art journal today, and the metallic techniques I'm showing today are more subtle, and they're a couple that I use all the time. I'm working in my art journal today, and when art journaling, the first thing I almost always do is to just throw some paint on the pages. I think this kind of loosens you up a little bit, and it just gets me going. So I first started by adding some thick white paint, and then I'm also adding some, this is fabric washi tape from 49 and Market, which is really nice. It's thicker than regular washi tape because it is like fabric, but it's still thin enough to be able to work with on a page like this. So I added that in my center, but I don't want it to look super blocky, so that's why I'm painting it, especially around the edges of the tape, so it looks like it can kind of blend into the rest of the page a little bit. I wanted to try to limit myself to a very limited color palette using just whites and browns. This is the hazelnut color in the metallic acrylic line from ephemera, and it has a nice little shimmer, but it's really subtle. I use these paints a lot in my art journal because they have such great colors, and I can really focus on just a color or two on a page. Next, I grabbed this embossing folder from Altenew. It's a really pretty flower bunch embossing folder. And usually when I'm embossing, I spritz my paper with a little bit of water just to make sure the paper doesn't rip at all. And then I loosely cut around the edges. I'm adhering this to my page using 3D adhesive. I figured that 3D adhesive would be the way to go because it would fill in all of the gaps, like the gaps that were made in the embossing process, because this isn't a journal like a book, and I didn't want over the years, when the book is closed and it's smushed, for the embossed image to flatten. So I figured if I had some 3D adhesive underneath, it would just be a little bit less likely to collapse. It also works great as an adhesive as well. Once I had these pieces adhered to my page, it was time to paint them to make it look like they're just part of the page and part of the background. So I go back and forth using some white and mixing it in with the hazelnut, and paint over this whole embossed image. I tried to keep my paint as dry as I could, especially on this first layer, because I knew if I used a lot of water and really pushed on this embossed image, it could start to flatten out again, which is not what I wanted. So I made sure not to add any water to my paint for the first round. After that paint dried, then I could do some lighter passes of paint using more watered down paint. Now I'm going to show one of my favorite techniques using foil sheets. I'm using Gilding glue from Prima and using a dauber to lightly hit the very raised edges of the embossed image. And once I let this glue completely dry, it's a tacky when dry type of glue, I can put the foil sheet on top of it, and it picks up the just little bits, and you can build up more and more. But I like how subtle it is and how you can really control it by how much more glue you add. You can go through with the dauber again and add more glue here and there. But I really love it because it picks up all of the raised edges and it helps the embossing folder image really stand out. Again, you don't want to push too hard. You don't want to collapse your embossed image. And you can see how it just lightly glistens a little bit. I'm going to enhance this with some metallic wax as well as I get closer to the end. But even when adding the metallic wax on top of the foil sheet like this, you can still see the extra shininess where the foil was. Now I'm adding some rub-ons from 49 in Market. They had the perfect vintage feel I was going for with this page. And I think they have like a really cool mixed media layered type of look. And they're so easy because you really just rub them on and then it looks like it's something that you would have spent hours creating. Now I'm adding some metallic wax. This is the stained wood color. Some of these waxes are shiny and add the metallic look. Other ones add more like a vintage and they're more matte. And so this one is a matte one. And I think it works really great in the background to use with stencils. This is hard to clean off of stencils and paintbrushes, so just keep that in mind when you're using it. You use warm water and some soap and you should be able to get it pretty clean, but just test it out before you use your favorite paintbrush and favorite stencil. At this point in the page, I was looking at it and I thought it just looked too brown and too dirty looking, a little too distressed, so I went over it with a wash of the white acrylic paint, and I am doing this by watering down the paint and just going over everything that I want one shade lighter. I used a paper towel to dab the tops of my embossed images so the flakes would not be covered up with paint. And now I'm using the rich copper color of the metallic wax, and this is a metallic one, so it has a little shine to it, and I am applying it with my finger because with your fingers you can have great control. You can feel how hard you're pressing and you really just need a light touch with this. It's better to have less on your finger and go back and forth and build up the layers than it would be to use a paintbrush and add a glob, because this, once it's there, it's kind of permanent and it's hard to move around after it's set. Now I have my background mostly done and it was time to work on my embellishments. I wanted to kind of keep the two areas where I have the embossing folder as like the focal point and the secondary focal point. So that's where I'm going to be clustering some ephemera and phrases. And right now I am distressing this piece of embroidery floss because I think it adds a nice different type of texture on the page. I am pulling a phrase from the Dina Wackley typed ledgers, and I love using these because it's so easy. I don't have to come up with a quote, and they're really good quotes. They're a really great layering item to add in art journals. This lady that I have in the bottom right corner is actually from the Tim Holtz Paper Dolls ephemera, and I think it's kind of funny to have some random lady in my art journal. She might get replaced at some time, but I also kind of like her. I think she's a little bit creepy. I think it's from the Halloween paper doll set, so I haven't used the paper dolls too much, but I do think they're kind of fun, so I might start using them a little bit more. A lot of the ephemera that I'm using is from 49 in Market. It just has a really nice vintage feel, and I also love florals and leaves, and there's usually a lot of that in their collections, so I love using it. And now, of course, an art journal page would not be complete if I did not add any speckles and paint splatters throughout it. I'm a little heavy-handed on this one. I have some bigger dots and then a lot of little smaller ones, and I just love the look and a little bit of lightness that these speckles give. When I was looking at it at this point, I thought that it still needed a little bit more of the metallic look. So I am taking the Gilding glue. I just made a little glue pile, and then I'm using a paintbrush to make dots around my two focal points. And This is kind of like how you would use enamel dots or sequins or glitter. So I'm just adding little dots here and there around the page. And then once the glue is completely dry, I am taking the foil sheet and just pressing it on these dots, and it comes out like little foiled dots. This week I did want to do more of a subtle version of how to add metallics. My metallic video from last week, I made a whole metallic element, so make sure to check that out as well. I always have a fun time playing in my art journal and testing out some new mediums, and as always, thanks for watching.